About the quality of translations. Hello. Actually, when talking about quality, then we've had the presentation before by Leonid Fyodor in very academic and comprehensive terms. Our company is very small, and we are slightly under achieving this critical mass because we are a bit less than 16 persons. So when I talk about the quality of translation, I would like to focus on the following aspects. One of our achievements, or the bump that we have overcome, were the ISO standards that we have recently been granted. This is the ISO 17100 and 9001. I'm going to tell you about our story, how we got there and how we came there. And maybe I will tell you about some advantages, additional benefits that we collected on the way. This is not the Tinder profile, still not yet. Well, Mikhail was very good at telling us about the stories that the most important thing in the activities of every translation agency, this is the personality of the owner or the founder or the CEO. I do believe it is so. This is something that is driving all of the other employees. When talking about me, I never mentioned that I was a translator, even though I started as a translator, but I actually present myself in these three identities, and this is something I can be talking about for a long time. I'm not going to talk about sports or travel, but I would rather concentrate on business. I will be talking about the KLS company and, in fact, about how we went through this process of certification and how we actually arrived at that destination. In fact, when we try to answer the question of why we decided to get the ISO standards, I could say that, of course, we really badly wanted to create the highly quality product, which is true. We really wanted to take care of the customer, which is also true. But me, as the owner, I wanted to have more money and to have more profit. What did I need to do for that? On the one hand, I had to improve the product that we were generating, and on the other hand, the product was supposed to be attracting the new clients and keeping the existing customers. So currently the statistics is that 83% of the company is about translation, 17% are taken by the interpreters and additional services. That is why we try to focus on the acquisition of the ISO standard for translations, for written translations, I mean. But it wouldn't be true to say that we were heading for this objective, like we saw the ISO and we were aiming for it. We were trying to search for new opportunities to attract new customers. When we saw one of the requirements in a tender, the ISO standard, the 17100, then, of course, I've heard about it, but I never fully realized what that was, and I had no idea how to get it. I knew that it was there, but is it available in Ukraine? Can you get certified under this standard in Ukraine? I have never known about this. So I asked my employees to learn more about this, to get as much details as possible about it. In a couple of weeks, I've been informed that there are two ways to get it. The first one would be lengthy and costly, and the second one would be fast but still costly. So the long process will be when you get the standard, you read the standard, you study it, you try to understand which processes you have, which processes you're still lacking, and which you need to implement into your daily routines in the production unit in terms of the production of translations. Then you need to implement all of this, and then you need to get the auditors who will assess and try to check that your activities will be compliant with these processes. And after some time, you will get a certificate, and that would amount to 2,000 euro. But there is also the fast process, the same 2,000 euro, and tomorrow you get the certificate. It will be printed next door in the kiosk. But it sounded quite awkward, so we decided to take the long road and try to understand what that was all about. We were applying for 2 certificates at the same time, so we were aiming at 17,100, but we also simultaneously received the 9,001. We were implementing this. I wouldn't boast that it was really my contribution, because I'm an entrepreneur and I also engaged the system integrator who was trying to detailize all of the processes and really supervise their implementation. And she suggested that we should focus on these 2 certifications. And this way, we would have the company compliant in the production as far as all of the aspects are concerned, but also in terms of management processes. And we need to say that when I started reading the standards, I wanted to understand what was behind it. In fact, it turned out that the standards included the requirements to the key processes, including the competence of translators and also the capacity building of the people doing the translations, also managing the processes for translation services, and also the quality management procedures. There are several aspects, and we can divide the internal and external value of ISO for the company. So this external value would imply that for your customers, ISO is the guarantee for the reliability of the company. It's a better and higher image and the status of the company for them. It's a sign of high quality of service, seemingly. But what is more important, this is also the precondition to bid for certain tenders. But what is even more important is that ISO standard, like 17100, is the specific checklist for the processes to do the translations in a company as they are supposed to be done. You take a standard, and this is the business process as described. You don't need to make it up. I will start from the beginning. We are a small company, and when I was establishing the company, I was creating it from scratch. When you are one person in a company, you are the director, the translator, the accounting officer, the editor, the courier, God forbid. So you are this jack of all trades. So you actually have little time left, but what you receive in the end is the average of the market. So unless you systematize the processes, you are the only person who possesses the knowledge that brings money to you. So on a large scale, you have all of the processes in your head. So in order to do the job, you need to get the assignment from customer A, and then you assign it throughout the business process B, and then hand it out to the translators, and then you use the business process C to get it back to the customer. And these processes are in your head. As far as marketing, the company growth, the prioritizing, the risk management, all of these things are iterated number of times. Each of the business process needs to be thought over, systematized, and described. Unless you have it, then every time your employees, if you have any, would keep asking questions with you whenever they have them. And also, unless the processes are documented and recorded, then every time you will give different answers to them. And every time an employee will get a different picture of the world. Therefore, as a result, you are wasting your working time inefficiently. Every time you are providing the employees with the slightly different information, eventually you receive the low-quality result. In the KLS, we wanted to have all of these business processes documented and systematized in a way to have each employee access them anytime. And this guidance should be not in the printed version on the desk of one of the employees, but it should be on the cloud. So every time an employee needs to specify some details, they will get the up-to-date version on the cloud. So whenever you have a business process for the price list or anything else upgraded or updated, then you get this information on the cloud. So whenever you change or alter the business process, then the employee will get the notification on the corporate email. Then, in the process of applying for the certificate, you face the following stages. The most important stage is the preparation. It takes about a year in order to implement all of this. So, a month before the certification itself, before the audit process itself, you pay for the audit services. They require the specific documents that you need to present to them that describe the business processes that you implemented. And here it's important to understand that you need to work with your employees and notify and warn them that you're going to have the certification in a month, the audit, but they shouldn't treat this as the show off or display. This is not showing off. This is not somebody coming to evaluate it. So just try to perform as you usually do on a regular daily basis. So this audit will take one day, but then you will need to continue working like this on and on. So when the auditors arrive to the company, that's the regular working day. They start talking to the managers and they start checking the business processes in the company. And then during the day, throughout this day, they keep asking questions whenever they get any in the process of the audit. During this week, we have the most important stage. It's not about issuing these beautiful certificates on paper, but this is the reference and the recommendations that the auditors spotted. That this is some recommendations that can be improved by next time. This is exactly the scope of work that you need to improve throughout the next year. So every time when you need to confirm the certificate every year after you get it. So after this year, you need to show what you have improved, that you didn't reach the plateau, but you kept progressing and developing. And the auditors could verify this progress over the last year. When talking about the outcomes of the implementation of the ISO, the most important achievements that we can present include the following two. We managed to have the faster orientation period for the new employees, and also this training of new employees takes much shorter now. When a newcomer that has never been doing this job is 3 times shorter. We used to have 3 months before, and now we have 1 month. You know, like these orphan soldiers, each of them knows that they are doing the same job. Of course, they can think differently, but they know that they are performing all of the processes more or less on the same basis. Therefore, their job is more consistent. And the second important achievement is, well, you need to remember that we are a small company, do you? It took me a long time to deal with the issue when the project managers, when they wanted to make their lives easier and they really wanted to increase the profit margin, so they didn't really want to send the translated texts for editing or proofreading, rather. After we implemented the ISO standards, they started doing this themselves. They felt like doing this. I'm not sure how this happened, but earlier I needed to struggle through this. I need to control this. Like, we are not sending this for proofreading. Why aren't we doing this? And now they're asking these questions to themselves. And they are the front line of our processes in terms of quality. Now, This is how we see what we have done and the standards that we have been given. We are, of course, announcing on this on the website that we have this ISO standards, etc. But then we try to ask these questions to ourselves: how important it is to our customers, and we really ran the survey to cover about 15 B2B customers, and we asked them what they think is most important for them to work with us, and they had these multiple choice answers, and the quality was important by all means, because quality shall be there by default. But at the same time, the survey included many issues like confidentiality, the convenience of payment settlements, etc. And the survey showed the ISO as a fact is not so important for the customers, at least the customers in the Ukrainian market that we work with. Many of them have not even heard about the standard before. It might imply that this is not a mandatory requirement in the market. I mean, this certificate is not mandatory when it goes about, food products or else. So the customers lack the understanding for the critical consequences that the error might entail. Many customers have not even heard about the standards. But this standard is rather meant for us, not for the customers. To conclude, I need to say that implementation of the ISO standards indirectly impacts the quality of your product. After all, the quality of the product depends on the raw material and the tools you're using to process this raw material, and on the processes that are engaged. So by large, the ISO standards are about the requirements to the raw materials and to the tools and the stipulated processes. At the same time, if there's anyone making an error, there's always this chance or risk for the human factor. You're not able to influence this, but you have more chances to spot this error and not to miss it. That is why, if you follow the requirements and if you comply with the standards, you can really reduce the risk of making a mistake because you distributed the resources properly. They are well understood to all of the actors in this process. And this is something that we have achieved as a result of this implementation. I'll be happy to take your questions.
Could you please share if anything has changed after you introduce the ISO when it comes to numbers, when it comes to the new clients? So how long have you been using, how long have you been standardized according to ISO, and what has changed in the work of the company? Well, we started thinking about the introduction of ISO when it first appeared in 2015. It just happened by accident. In 2016, we started working on that, and we were certified in the beginning of 2018. As for the global changes, well, that's not only because of the standard, but the growth of company has continued as before, like 20% per year. This is something we had before, and this is what we started to continue. What we noticed is a slightly higher churn rate. People started to leave, especially those who worked for us before, it was a bit difficult for them to work according to the new standard because we were a small company before, and now it's something closer to a corporation with the KPIs and control. So this is something that we have noticed. I have one more question, Volodymyr. Thank you for your presentation, Volodymyr. My question is about the decrease of the lead-in time for the new employee. It's now just 1 month instead of the 3, and it's it's a translator who chooses the editor. There are some unusual situations, but usually a month is a sufficient time for training and adaptation, and it's enough for the person to take the decision. So sometimes people are just afraid at the first stage. Okay, I've never done simultaneous interpreting, or I've never worked for big corporate clients, etc. So quite often we suggest the following. If the person has a question, they should come up with 3 possible solutions. We usually pick one of those solutions, and otherwise we offer something else. One more question. As for the importance of ISO 17100 for the client, in Ukraine you are saying it's not very important, but for the international clients, what do you think? Well, we do not have any precise statistics about that. We hear from clients that it is important, but it's not a crucial factor. Yeah, we also have ISO 9001 for quite some time, and our situation shows that we have won lots of major Ukrainian clients because we had this standard. So it was important for major companies. Yes, I would agree with Tatiana, and I'm asking this for a reason, because if there is a tender for, let's say, shipbuilding companies, in this case, that's a must-have. The company should be standardized. Other questions? So, do we have many certified companies here? Yeah. Yeah, more or less, we know what we are speaking about. One more question about Shiva with multiple hands. Right now, I'm something similar to what you have been before. I'm doing lots of things at the same time. I'm wearing lots of hats. So, how should I proceed, and where can I learn it except for this conference? Good question. We attend 1 or 2 conferences per year, at which I actually realize lots of new things. And one of the things that I do understand is that we do not have to invent solutions for everything, because they already exist. And on the other hand, the conference gives you the feeling of reality. You are not thinking too much of yourself. You are just starting to implement what you are lacking. So if you just take the text of the standard and read it, even without the actual audit, without actual certification, this would be a huge help for you, because, for instance, we also have the standard for interpreting. There is no certification for it in Ukraine, but if you read it and if you try to implement it to some extent, you will greatly improve your processes for interpreting. Thank you, Vladimir. Vladimir is staying here.